Welcome back to another edition of Sports Ball, a Baltimore Sports Collectibles podcast. Uh, I am very, very happy to have a good friend of mine, Michael Frank, joining us today. TV sports director for years with CBS Sports and Fox Sports, and now he just dips his toes in the pools and shows off his Emmy Awards. And lucky enough to be one of my good friends. And Mike, thank you so much for giving me a little time and giving me a little favor and jumping on here.
Pleasure, Danny. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I joke around, but you really do have four Emmys behind you. So we're gonna. Really want to know how we ended up there. So let's start at the beginning. Where are you from? Who'd you grow up rooting for? Who are your teams? This is a sports podcast.
Rockaway Beach, Queens, even narrower, Neponset, six-block subsection of Rockaway Beach. I grew up a diehard Knicks fan back when they won the two championships. Mets fan, was at the 73 playoffs when Bud Harrelson and Pete Rose had their fight. And I to
Were
this
you, were
day,
you really? I didn't know you were there.
oh, I was there.
Oh, I didn't know
Right
that.
field seats, perfect view of Rose barreling into Harrelson at second. And I do believe my cousin Zeke started the chant, Rose eat shit. It started out of my cousin Zeke's mouth and went to 55,000 other people. We were there to watch Cleon, Willie Mays, and Seaver go out to the left field bleachers to offer anything, bats, balls, for people to stop throwing bottles at Pete Rose.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
Sparky Anderson, I guess, was the manager. He pulled them off the field.
Oh.
Many years later, I saw Pete Rose at a Vegas shopping mall autographing type place. I don't know if you know of these places. People
Oh,
sign
he's still there. He's there 24/7. He's like a
exactly.
slot machine. You just
Yeah.
wake him up, give him $1, he signs, he goes back to bed. Yeah.
And I just read a story about him talking about that fight, and someone threw a bottle of whiskey at him. So I walked in and literally said to him, "Hey, I was at that game. I was not the one who threw the whiskey bottle at you." And he laughed. I left out the part that I think my cousin Zeke started Rose eat shit, but we actually had a nice conversation until I was nicely ushered into either buying something or
Yep.
please leave. But so, Minnesota Vikings fan because I was a huge Fran Tarkenton fan. When he left the Giants in '72 and was traded, I wept. And
So wait, I'm going to plead ignorance here to
yeah,
my New Yorker friends. So my New Yorker friends told me that the Knicks don't go with wait. So the Knicks and the Giants fans stay together.
yes,
Okay. So you were a Giants fan
I
until
was a,
Tarkenton left.
despite the Joe Namath thing over my head.
Okay.
I didn't grow up as a Joe Namath fan. That happened down the road when I met him.
Okay.
As a fan, as a Giants fan, I went to games at Yankee Stadium. Fran Tarkenton was my favorite player. When he got traded to the Vikings, I moved with him to the Vikings, which led to three disappointments. Some people will say, wait a second, no, they lost four Super Bowls. No, one of them, Joe Cap, was the quarterback. So the three with Tarkenton were three of the darkest days of my childhood. It shows you I had a pretty.
But a great team.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
no, no.
mean, I feel the same way about the Buffalo Bills. I'm
Yes,
sorry they didn't get it, but do not diminish the legacy when you do it that many years in a row. You just
right,
can't go back that many years.
right. All
Yeah.
those losses were crushing. But yes, those were my teams. I wasn't a big hockey fan growing up. It was Knicks, Mets, Giants, and then Vikings.
Did you play? Did you just collect any cards when you were younger, or just watch games?
Watched a lot of games. The thing that we did that was interesting, and I should probably show you some of this, is my cousin Zeke, he of the Rosie shit, 2 years older than me. We came up with a one-on-one football league where we would literally go to a field and play against each other one-on-one. But the twist was we also kept stats as though we were a 40-man roster playing each other. They were approximate stats. You know, I'd snap the ball to myself, throw it over his head. If I ran and caught it underneath him, it was Tarkinen to John Gilliam, or it was Terry Bradshaw to Lynn Swan. It was ridiculous. But we had all the trappings of the games. I brought home floodlights from the lumberyard I worked at and hung them off his roof. We used to do a post-game show sitting on his side porch with croquet mallets. And we would do interviews back and forth like we were sportscasters, like this game actually mattered. So we had a fantasy football league that existed in our head. I
So
have stacks of paper to prove this.
you might have just led me to where I was going anyway. So did you know you wanted to stay in sports in your future, or was this just kids being kids having fun, and you just were a diehard sports fan as a kid?
Both. I was delusional in thinking that I would have my choice of do I want to play in the NBA, Major League Baseball, pro football. So I was delusional.
Yeah.
Once but at no point did I ever think I would not do something in sports. And it was when I went to college that I found out that the sports competition in Neponset was a little narrow compared to sports competition at UCLA.
Is that where did you go to school? Talk us through your college years.
Okay.
How did you go from keeping score as Friend Harkington to exiting college in the sports world?
So at 11 years old, I turned on the TV one night just in time to see Bill Walton and the Bruins lose their 88-game winning streak to Notre Dame.
Oh wow!
I don't know why that affected me so deeply, but I decided at that moment that I would go west at some point and help Coach Wooden get the program back on track. So that just became my thing from 11.
Was that seriously what motivated you? Was the end of the streak?
Yes.
Huh.
I had no idea they had a winning streak. I put the TV on, and really, literally, just at the end to see them lose. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was that John Shoemate on that Notre Dame team? Whatever it was, the 88-game winning streak affected me deeply, and I decided I'm going to UCLA to help them.
Guys, this is an honest moment. I've known Mike for a while now. This is new for me too, so we're enjoying this, Mike. Okay, so keep going. I'm having a blast.
So it just became an assumption. I'm going to work in sports. I'm going to go to UCLA. I'm going to help Coach Wooden, and I had no thoughts beyond that. And everyone thought, and they probably would think, hearing the story, that you're crazy. When I applied for UCLA to get in there, I had no doubts I would get in. I don't know why, but I got in, and that was I had no second choice. That was it. And when I went out there my freshman year, I walked down to Spalding Field to practice, football field right next to Paulie, waited for practice to end. Terry Donahue came out. I introduced myself. I said, Coach, do you allow walk-ons and tryouts? He goes, sure we do. Where'd you play high school ball? I said, I didn't play high school ball. He gave me this dumbfounded look like, huh? And this is before Howard Stern, so you're not guessing, what radio show has sent you out here. Right. They didn't think I was, stuttering John. He said, okay, you didn't play high school ball. What makes you think you could play at UCLA? I said, well, I came to college for opportunities, new experiences. I'm 17 years old. One of my experiences I'd like to play football. He said, okay, I'll buy that. What position do you think you could even play? Well, I said, quarterback, of course. And then that's when he just walked away. He didn't say anything. He has no reaction. He just turned, exited right, stage right.
You couldn't have said safety.
I hadn't played safety. I had played quarterback.
You hadn't played quarterback either.
No, I had. In the street I had. We played 3-on-3.
Your cousin would have vouched for you if you said
yes,
safety.
Zeke Finkelstein would have vouched for me. No. Homer Jones, no. Okay. Bob Hayes, no. Zeke Finkelstein could have vouched for me.
All right. So that ended your college football career.
Mm-hmm. With a thud. Right. The big thud.
And I'm assuming when you went there to help Coach Walton, it was not to be on the court either. So.
Oh no! Well, first of all, Coach Wooden had already retired.
Oh, had he by then? Okay.
Yes. When I got there, it was Gary Cunningham. So it was Bartow and Cunningham. So they had a freshman team. I tried out on the freshman team.
Oh, you really did? But you can ball. You could ball a little bit, couldn't you?
I could shoot. Yeah, I was a typical.
More than you could play football, with all due respect.
Well, the football, I had a nice 20-yard, out by the hydrant. I thought that would be the new West Coast offense.
Okay, so you really tried out for basketball too?
Yeah, and I went through 2 days of playing. I think I took one shot. I took one shot. I took a James Harden flop. The foul wasn't called. The ball didn't go in, and I didn't make it past the first cut. But I tried.
I give you credit for the onions.
I also tried out for baseball, which, by the way, was my worst sport. I couldn't play baseball.
See, that was the sport I played. I was built to be a catcher, but I played third base.
You look like a cat. I tell you, with your headphone on and your hat on, right now you've got the tools of ignorance. Right now, but
What it does is it both covers the bald spot back
mm,
here, which is a key thing, and it resolves the hair situation
mm,
on camera. It's a very strategic hat.
it's a very strategic. Plus,
And,
there's so much going on that you don't really look at any particular
well,
one
it's
thing.
funny because this sign wasn't made for this, and I'm too cheap to really buy another sign right now, so we're improvising.
I got you.
Yeah.
You want to hear
So
about my baseball tryout on the sport I really can't play, cannot play?
yeah.
So at UCLA, the old Sawtell Field was off campus, somewhere by the 405. So I went out on my bicycle with my red, white, and blue Montreal Expos $14 baseball mitt on the rat trap on the back of my Raleigh bicycle. And I went down Wilshire Boulevard to Sepulveda and then couldn't find the field. So I just went back home and that was it for baseball. I had no cleats. I had sneakers. Um, I had played a little bit in Little League. I really wasn't good. I was afraid of the ball hitting me. I had no arm. I had a good football. For some reason, I had a good football arm, not a good baseball arm. So at that point, started to think that, I got to stop checking the agate type to see transactions that I've been drafted, which I eventually gave up at 35. But I said, you know what? Let's do something different. So freshman orientation, UCLA, August of 1982. There is a choice between going to the Daily Bruin or to KLA Radio. I chose radio. And from the moment I started doing it, I did it for 4 years. I did play by play, I did talk shows. I would say my greatest accomplishment there that I'm proud of, I have nothing on the wall to prove it. But when I first got to UCLA, the campus radio station did not do men's basketball or football. Kind of a big deal.
That's
We
unbelievable.
weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
KMPC was the big powerhouse 50,000 watt station. They paid big money for Bruin football, Bruin basketball. So when I got there, it was a given. We don't do that. So we would get press passes to do, post game interviews or sound bites during the week. A couple of times I got passes to go to a Laker game. I interviewed Magic Johnson when he was a rookie. He was a wonderful, wonderful guy. But football and
Was it
basketball,
was it just like winning time?
he was eerily like winning time.
That's
Eerily.
that's another conversation.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, but we were not allowed to do men's football and men's basketball. We did women's basketball, we did men's baseball. Um, and the thought was that we would steal listeners from KMPC. No one would listen to us. We were a carrier current, which was basically meant you had to plug in your radio to get us. You could not get us with antenna or cable or a stream. You had to plug your clock radio into the wall, hear us, and by the way, the sound quality with an electric hum going through was terrible. No one was going to listen to us over KMPC. Plus, they were going to announcers like me. So I was the junior or the associate sports radio person for 2 years at KLA. Then I got elected or nominated or handed over. You're the sports director for your senior year. So I made an appointment with Bob Fisher, I believe his name was, who was the athletic director at UCLA. I went in and pleaded our case, which was that we're not a rival to anyone. We're students. We should get a chance to learn. We're not. And he said, yes, you got it. In fact, I had gone back
Oh,
to New York for the summer and got a phone call saying, guess what? Bob Fisher just called and says, you guys can do football and basketball this year. And did it, was great. I have tapes of my games. I have them under lock and key. I want no one to ever hear them. It was one point many years down the road where John Madden, who I worked with, insisted on listening to them and drove all the way across country listening to me over the phone, which was another story I'll tell you. But bottom line was that was my legacy, I think, there, because when I graduated and ever since, UCLA Radio does their games and now sells advertising, makes enough money. Now, when I say now, it's 40 years they've been doing it.
right.
That didn't exist before me, and I'll take that as my endowment to the Bruins.
Well, it's fantastic, and if you're not familiar with UCLA sports, if anybody's listening or watching this, the UCLA sports history is so rich and it goes so far back in multiple sports. Jackie Robinson, you're talking about was a four sport athlete. So, you're talking about a baseball program that's been well renowned, still to this day is a top program. Basketball, football, I mean, for decades and decades and decades. So, before Mike, when Mike was there and getting those rights, is no small thing. And a lot of East Coast people, I think, forget about UCLA a little bit. Here in Maryland, we had Lefty Driesell, and his goal was to create Maryland to be the UCLA of the East.
Right.
So, that's how long, UCLA has been revered. So, kudos to you for getting then some money and getting it out of the networks. But then you ended up going to work for the networks. So, so how'd you start in TV, and where'd you start?
So in that senior year, when they start to tell you, okay, you need to have a career now, not just a fantasy. I, through friends who knew friends who knew friends, I got an interview with Mike Weissman, who was the genius running NBC Sports. I think he was 32, 33, 34 at the time. Not only the executive producer, but also the guy who produced their lead football and lead baseball games. He's a very talented guy. And so I got to meet with him in New York City, and he was with his assistant named Sean McManus. That might be a name familiar to some people. Now
Mm-hmm.
has run CBS Sports for 25 years. And we talked about my desires to be an announcer. And I was 21 years old. And they said, great, go get a job somewhere in a small market, do it for 10 years, and send us a tape. Now, 10 years sounded like a very long time at age 21. It's, again, go live 50% more of your life in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Nothing against Fort Smith, Arkansas, but that wasn't something that interested me. So he said, the other option is, have you ever thought about going into production? And I had no idea that there was a production level job in between either announcing or being a cameraman. So he invited me to come watch him work, do a Dodger game in April out in LA, early April of '82. And I came out there, borrowed my roommate's car, drove out there, walked in the truck. And the first thing I noticed was grown men are screaming at each other, being excited. They're putting together something with Fernando Valenzuela and his wind up and how he looked up at the sky. And this seems interesting. And number two, it is really cold in here. It's really, really, really cold in this truck. I'll have to, next time I work, I better bring a jacket.
If anybody doesn't know, anything around the production equipment in studios are kept at a very cold level.
Oh my
And
God, cool.
and if you don't know, if you see people TV anchors, they want to be in winter coats.
Mm-hmm. But the excitement level is really
Yeah.
what caught me because I don't know about everybody else. School bored the pants off me. There was no time in school that I didn't do the Ferris Bueller look at the clock. Why isn't that clock moving? The excitement by these grown men, the fact that it was sports. Um, how do you do this? So I did 3 more events for them, another baseball game as a paid actual runner. And then I did the Pepsi relays right there at UCLA. And I asked a guy named Glenn Adamo, who was the AD on the game, while I was moving a chair with him. That was my second big thing. The first thing was I handed somebody a flashlight. I'm moving a chair with him. And I said, okay, how do you do this? How do you get into this? He goes, well, if you want to stay in LA, whenever the circus comes to town, meaning a game, we'll hire you as a runner. But if you really want to pursue this, you got to live in New York. Because at that time, it's NBC, ABC, CBS. ESPN has just started, but they're showing like log rolling and tape shows. They're not a viable choice at that point. Fox didn't exist. So I made the decision, I'm going back to New York. I had been away for 4 years. My family's back here. I'd like to try living in New York City. That sounds like fun. Let me go back to New York. So I go back to New York, and first thing I do is I call NBC. I said, hey, I'm the guy that worked on events out west. I'd like to do, I'm here. I want to work here. Great. We have a Yankee game in September. Give us a call. Click. Not nasty, but just end of call. So I sat down with pad and pen. It was June. They paid $35 a day back then. I wrote that down, $35 in September. Yeah, I can't live on that. So I started to call other people that knew people, and my uncle Newton knew somebody named Barry Solomon who did something for some new outfit called MTV. I'm not sure who they are, what they do, what he does, but he's a friend, go see him. So I go out and buy a 3-piece suit. My mother lends me her burgundy Firebird. I drive to Manhattan, park for the whopping sum of $9. $9 to park a car. Outrageous. Same car today is 60, 65.
It's
And as we
unbelievable.
know, a gallon of gas is $9. So I go in, I've got my one of my 500 printed resumes. That whole process back then, pick the
Oh
paper
yeah.
stock, heavy stock, light stock, what color ink, and if there's a
It
minimum.
had to be the right cream color paper. It couldn't be the plain
Yes,
white. Yes.
cream with a heavy texture to it. Got to keep it to one page.
Oh yeah.
And of course, I hadn't done anything, but I filled out the page. But you also, for the printer, had a minimum. I don't remember if the minimum was 100 or 500. I don't remember what I did. I may have done 500. I take the one resume I've sent out maybe two to local stations with tapes. And this is now my third resume I'm using. And I go up to his office. There's no secretary. I knock on the door. There's no answer. Door's locked. So I just took my resume. Sorry, I missed you. Maybe I got my dates mixed up, whatever. And I put it under his door. And 2 days later, the guy called me, Barry, all apologetic, all upset that he had missed the appointment, and said, I'm going to give you the name of a guy who works in sports TV. His name is Bill Peters. Called him. Turns out he was a freelance AD for both ABC and CBS. Told me about what the entry-level job was, which back then was logging. Right. You watch a game, you take notes, you edit highlights. Sounded interesting to me. Going to pay me to watch a game. So hung up the phone with him, and snob that I was, I said, ABC or CBS? No, I think I like CBS. They got Pat Summerall, they got the US Open, they got the golf, they got John Madden. They go, yeah, I'll pick CBS over ABC. Called CBS, got a guy named George Veras on the phone, started to do my spiel. He says to me, call Simon. Hangs up the phone. That meant call a guy named Jeff Simon. I called Jeff Simon, and he said, yeah, we bring people in, you work on this set, and you're one of those heads in the back of the set that you see working away while Brent does whatever he's going to do. And he says, maybe I'll bring you in this Friday. Well, Friday couldn't come fast enough. My heart's beating. I'm worried. Friday comes. We can't have you this week. You can come next week. Devastated I was, because I wanted instant gratification of this week. July 25th, 1982, I walked into CBS. I sat up on the set and was in charge of calling Jimmy Arias, calling the South Orange, New Jersey tennis tournament, whatever happening there, to keep track of. Jimmy Arias was the big player. So all day I'd call, okay, he breaks 2-1. He holds 2-2. First set, 6-3. And I wrote these notes down for Brent's replacement, because this was July. This was July 25th. Brent's on vacation. John Tesh is on the set. Wonderful man. I wound up working.
Entertainment Tonight, John Tesh, right?
Yes. Yeah. Before that, he was a local CBS sports person on a local CBS station, WCBS. And he did a lot of the sports Saturday, Sunday things like speed skating, downhill skiing. I wound up in the future doing two Tour de France's or Tours de France with him, as well as the historic Wengen Downhill, where Bill Johnson wins the first ever downhill by an American in history. I worked in that with John Tesh, but on this weekend, he was doing the Brent job. So we're done with the scores. The day is over. I'm sitting there wondering, all right, what's next? And they handed me a tax form to fill out. You're going to pay me for this? I made phone calls, but you're going to pay. And so I did. And started off by being an office worker, on a Monday, coming Tuesday, on a Tuesday, coming Wednesday, day-to-day non-contract, $50 come in, and whatever we need you to do, you do. The big break I got that summer, about a month later, I was asked to carry a videotape like a messenger to an edit facility where a gentleman by the name of David Winter, who was producing the US Open, and Bob Mattina, who was an associate director, were editing. And I asked Craig Silver in the office about, hey, I'd like to work the US Open. How do I do that? I mean, tennis was a passion back then. That's Borg, McEnroe, Connors. My favorite, Ilie Nastase.
This was the heyday of, yeah.
In my opinion, yes.
Yeah.
And Craig said, hey, when you bring this tape to David and Bob, David is in charge. Ask him. So I went there, I handed them the tape. I sat behind them watching them edit. They had no interest in talking to me, which they shouldn't. I'm just there handing over a tape. And I finally worked at the courage to say, David, hey, could I work on the US Open? And when he did, he goes, well, we're kind of full now, but I'll let you know. Went back to Craig. Craig says, yeah, that means you don't need anybody. All right, that's fine. So US Open back then used to start on a Tuesday. Tuesday was the first day. So there was no Sunday exhibitions. There was no matches Monday. Tuesday, my friend Marcel Freeman, who was a UCLA tennis player and a friend of mine, was playing against Chip Hooper in the first round. He left me tickets to go.
Oh, that's cool.
So I leave Rockaway Beach, Queens on the Q22 to go to Beach 116th Street to get in the Woodside bus, to go to Woodside, Queens, get on the subway to go to the US Open to watch my friend Marcel. Marcel, it turns out, was going to be playing a late in the day match. So I went over to the CBS compound to just look through the fence. Do I know anybody? And sure enough, David Winter comes walking by, the same guy who said, we don't have work, and says, what are you doing? That's how he talked. Nothing. You want to work? Sure, I'll work. I come in. It's the compound. I'm all excited. First stop, of course, was the craft table. And he looks at me and goes, I'm not hiring you to eat. And the first thing I was asked to do was to work with John Tesh, who was going to do a feature on what does it take to be a linesman in the US Open. Okay. So I went, made an appointment to speak to, whoever's in charge of that. And apparently I did a 4-hour interview with him to get all of John's background. And the head of the USTA called Frank Chirkinian, the head of the US Open, to say, who's this investigative reporter, Mike Frank, who just grilled our linesman for 4 hours? And so Chirkinian, he was a legend. Winner, who's this Mike Frank? Why don't I know anything about him? So I handed all my stuff to Tesh. Tesh was like blown away by all the material. Great. Same token, they sent me in to log tennis matches. Now, this was, again, I'd be home watching this tennis if you weren't asking me to work on it. This was not work.
I'll vouch for that. You watch tennis all the time.
Exactly.
Every time I talk to you, you're watching tennis.
So I'm logging an Yvonne Lendl, Tim Mayotte match. The AD has left hours before. I won't disparage him by name, but he was more interested in figuring out what he was making because back then it was all union, all on the clock, and he was out shopping for laissez sweaters and ice cream cones. So he comes back. This set it was like a 5-setter, 10 match points, ridiculous, and he hasn't watched a moment. I have everything marked down. Service court, what are the important points, backhands, forehands. It was more like a transcript than a logging. And he comes in and scared to death he was that this was going to be a huge 10-minute highlight package, and he hadn't watched a point. So we go in, sit down with the aforementioned David Winter, and I walk through all the key moments in the match, and they just look at me and go, well, go do it. And we did. And from that moment on, between the Tesh thing and that, I was heralded as a second coming of Danny Black or something. So off we went, and my assignment for the fall became working on the NFL Today and College Football Today as a researcher 7 days a week. And that was my first season. NFL Today with the legendaries, Brent, Jimmy the Greek, Irv Cross, and
So, and I'm going to plead ignorance here, and you've told me this story a million times, so I'm really embarrassed. When did you actually start going on the road?
My first road,
and I'm sorry, which team was that actually with? Which broadcast crew?
The first road trips for me were in the winter doing gymnastics with Ed Gorn, who would later be the president, number 2 in charge of Fox Sports for a long time. And we did gymnastics in Jacksonville. We did gymnastics in Chicago. My first events were all the sports I did not know. And I had to learn not just the TV production, but how does gymnastics. Okay, so the women have 6 events, the men have 4 events. This is how you score it. This is what you need to know. And learning, well, how do you font it? How do you graphic it? It's all about, those graphics, not just identifying who the people are, but, what the scores are, what they need to move ahead. This moves into second place. And then I moved into a lot of European traveling events. My first NFL experience, traditional sport experience, was in 1983. The announcers were Dick Stockton and Wayne Walker for half the year. Wayne Walker, the famous linebacker for that great Lions team with Mike Lucci and I think Paul Newhoff, who destroyed Joe Namath's knee. And the second half of the year
Don't ever forget you're speaking to a Baltimore fan. Don't look at me for sympathy. I saw that.
Okay. My second half of the year was really fun. Hank Stram and Jack Buck. And let me tell you something. To watch Jack Buck in a production meeting giggling at Hank Stram was worth the price of admission. Hank was out of his mind in a good way, in a fun way. He was all about the swimps, the shrimps boys, the swimps, the swimps, the swimps. When are the swimps coming? Are they fried shrimp? Are they fresh shrimp? He had things about being driven in a brown Lincoln Continental. He would talk about the most bizarre things. I look at Jack Buck, who had his legs crossed at the ankle. It's a little skin showing in a sock. And he just had this smile on his face, like just this, I can't get enough of this guy. And later, when I worked with Joe Buck, and I would tell him how much fun it was to work with his dad, he really enjoyed hearing those stories. And so that was my first experience doing a traditional sport in the road.
Okay, so how do you get from the balance beam to the 50-yard line? From the balance beam to the 50-yard line, how do we go from gymnastics to football?
You know, it's very funny because you get pigeonholed very early. First, I was pigeonholed as being the Euromeister. That name comes from a guy named Joe Assetti. Joe Assetti, a brilliant director, no longer with us. He was a Rune Arledge. He directed with Rune Arledge, did all the Olympics, brilliant mind, the funniest person ever. Weltmeister, he was called. And I did a lot of European events, and you become known as, oh, you're the Euromeister, which is both a compliment and kind of a narrowing into, well, that's what you do. That's who you are. Then you start doing all these tape turnaround shows, things that are shot and edited in long form, like you're doing a documentary of a sport, because sports back then, like the Tour de France and the Iditarod, I did that. They were not done, same day turnaround. They were, weeks later. So you become known for that. You're that guy. And I take it as a compliment because it seems like everything they gave me, I became known for that. But then you go.
So you did how many Tour de France's?
I did 2.
Okay.
I did 2 Tour de France's. The famous one I did was the second one in 1985. For those people who are really cycling nerds, Greg LeMond on the same team as Bernardino, the Badger. And there was a battle because the way cycling works is over the 10, the team is working for one guy to win. You can't work for 2 guys to win. You're either working for Jordan or you're not. You're not working for Jordan and Pippen. Pippen is also working for Jordan. So at one point in the race, LeMond could have overtaken, he was the stronger rider. They're in the mountains. And LeMond was told, step back, because was a huge star in France. And this was probably his last chance. LeMond, you're the American. You're not ready yet. That was a thing. And as a matter of fact, on the last day of racing, it was a individual sprint, and LeMond won it. The producer didn't want to do any coverage of it. I said, you got to leave a crew. Wow. You never know. Crash, and you can't. All right, well, big mouth, you stay with the camera crew if you think it's so important. So LeMond wins the stage. It's an individual race. He wins it. That's the first American ever to win a stage of the Tour de France. My producer didn't want to have a camera there. Okay, we got that. The moment we missed.
And it ends up being Greg LeMond, by the way. But go ahead.
Yeah. And the moment we missed, I didn't get a camera on it, was the race was over, and I went looking for LeMond to see if there was going to be a moment with him and Eno. And there was. I'm the only person who saw it. End of the stage, after the awarding of the jerseys, behind stage, the 2 of them, hands on each other's shoulders, face to face talking. Would have been a wonderful shot, but I was there looking without the camera crew, didn't have a phone, didn't get it, but I could tell you that they basically kissed and made up for whatever went on. So there was that. The previous June, I had worked with John Madden's crew on a couple of specials that were interview specials. And we did one with Larry Bird. Game 7 the night before, the Lakers have beaten them. And we have Larry Bird and John Madden booked the next day to do an interview. We all said, there's no way he's coming. Bird. If he is coming, he's going to be in a lousy mood, and he certainly won't be on time. No. 9 a.m., Larry Bird, and I'm going to tell you, gracious, forthcoming, and if anybody else thinks otherwise, funny guy. Funny, even after losing Game 7. So I worked on this show, didn't do much, met John. I go off to the Tour de France, and they were looking for a new broadcast associate, which is the lowest production position. You're in charge of everything On air, it's graphics, but you're hiring the runners, you're getting petty cash, you're booking the hotel rooms, you're booking the travel, you're getting everybody their information. If you've seen the movie History of the World Part 1, it's, oh, piss boy. So I guess I was good at that job.
Guys,
And
guys,
then,
Google that if you're not familiar. You'll be
yes,
happy.
Google,
Yeah, yeah.
Google. Oh, piss boy. So Harvey Korman, one of the underrated geniuses of all time. So I'm in Lyon, France, and I don't know how we had a football, but somehow we had a football. And I was in the backyard teaching the French crew just the basics. How do you throw a ball? You know, all the things that Terry Donahue wouldn't let me do. Here's how you throw a ball. Here's how you catch a ball. And, you know, half hour of that, whatever. Now I went back to my room and did what everybody would do back then. Is I got in my tub, ran a hot tub, because showers in France, you know, in small hotels on the road, it's going to be a bath.
Mike, you and I
Right.
both agree showers are important. Let's just be
Oh,
honest. We
oh,
both
yeah.
agree hotel showers are important. Let's
Believe
just get it on
that.
the record. It's part of our bond as friends.
It's very important.
I think we have to have it
Hygiene.
out there. Have to have it
Hygiene.
out there. Yep.
Did you want me on here unshowered? Hygiene.
Did you
So
bring a shower head for the interview
for which interview? This one?
today? Yes.
Yeah,
Do you,
I
do
live
you-
in my own house. I have a shower head installed. I didn't bring it here.
I
I
didn't
bring
know
it
if you
on
brought
the
it
road.
room to room or if we were okay.
No, I bring it on the road. In
Okay.
fact,
Okay.
Charles Barkley apparently now knows about me. So I'll tell you about that. But finishing this, so I'm up in my hot tub. I'm up in my bathtub. I've got my Sony Walkman playing Born in the USA over my attached speakers, wire attached, no Bluetooth, obviously. Phone rings in the hotel room. Again, we don't have cell phones. It's very unusual to get a phone call in a hotel room during the Tour de France when you're only going to be in that hotel room for one night. Nobody knows I'm here. A guy by the name of Scott Johnson, who's now a director at ESPN, calls me and says, "Did you know you're on the schedule as the lead BA with Madden Summerall?" I'm like, no, nobody asked me. That's how sports TV worked. No executive call to say, "Hey, would you like this job?
Right.
Do you think you can do this job? By the way, since you are freelance, do you have another job planned for the fall?" No, you're just on a schedule. So I would say that was a case of the relationships, because the people who had been BAs with John before were his trusted lieutenants: Lance Barrow, Richie Zients, Mike Arnold. They all knew me and all said, "Yeah, you'll like Michael." And I guess he did.
But also showed he trusted the people he worked with.
Oh yes, well no. In the same way, when I earned his trust, he asked me for recommendations.
So when did you start working closely with him? I mean, I know there's a little build up period, you know, from day one to you know your last day. What was kind of that evolution in your process, you know, on the crew from you know booking hotels or whatever it was at the beginning to what were you actually doing, you know, down the road with them?
So it started off in August of
And
'85.
just to be clear, I'm sorry, we're
Yeah,
talking about the John Madden crew,
yeah,
NFL football, and
yeah,
this is 1985. You said.
yes.
Okay. And at this time, John Madden is a retired NFL head coach. He coached the Raiders. If you're not familiar, highest winning percentage of any head coach of all time with 100 wins. He had a relatively short career as a head coach with the Raiders, extremely successful. A little bit reluctant, but very quickly successful in broadcasting. And John Madden shot and rose up to become a broadcaster. So if you only know him from the video game, we are talking about him pre-video game in his actual professional life. So this is the John Madden as a broadcaster, his crew that you're working with.
Right. And in 1985, at that point, he's already well on his way to being the John Madden. His first year out of football was 1979. I did not do a full season of that. It was a competition in 1982 when I was a senior in college. Dial back to Super Bowl 16, everybody. That's the San Francisco Cincinnati first Joe Montana Super Bowl, highest rated of all time, because it was a blizzard in America. I think they had 126 million viewers. It was the most watched. And CBS had a competition that year. The executive producer, Terry O'Neill, was still deciding during that season, because this was going to be his first Super Bowl producing since he left ABC Sports. He's now in charge of NFL football. He's now in charge of the first Super Bowl he's going to produce. It's Madden and Summerall versus Jack Buck and Hank Stram. No, sorry, I'm wrong. Vin Scully. I'm sorry.
Right, right.
You want to edit this? I'll start off cleanly again.
Nah, it's still Vince Scully.
Okay, so it's John Madden and Pat Summerall versus Vin Scully and Hank Stram. And it's decided,
These are legends. I mean, this is
oh, yeah.
unbelievable.
Oh, I mean, I got to work. I just read a little off. Frank Lieber, Kurt Gowdy, Charlie Jones, um, Jack Buck, Vince Scully. I met, never worked with Vince, and obviously Pat, Jim Nance, Brett Musburger. I mean, I think I
I
got.
mean, and if anybody's watching or listening and you have an interest in getting into sports or sports broadcasting, if you're not familiar with all these names, even the Rune Arledge, before, I mean, you look up these names, understand the history of sports TV. I mean, these are a lot of the people that have defined what we see today.
Well put. So in '82 for the catch, it's Scully and Stram calling it because they had awarded Pat and John Super Bowl 16, and that was a consolation prize for Vin and Hank. My understanding is Vin was so upset he went to NBC over that. I guess his contract was up. Whatever. So John has now been lead guy with Pat in the firmament since '82. Which also, by the way, was a strike season. So now you've got '85. John's really starting to, surface. The old Madden team has now become a thing. His video game is still a couple of years away, but John's already a star at this point, and CBS will do anything to make him happy.
And slightly in the age difference between us. So I'm growing up at this time. I'm watching football at this time. The Baltimore Colts left Baltimore in 1984. So for me, this was a weird transition because, as you know, the regional TV rights, you only get access to the teams in your market. Well, it was very weird to go from a Baltimore Colts TV market to a Washington football TV market. And all of a sudden, we were getting exposed to different networks, different broadcast crews. And because we weren't clearly defined, we were getting CBS and Fox games all the time. So we were getting more coverage than a lot of cities. I don't know, if it was because they felt bad, we lost, the Colts, but we were very lucky in that we got the regular lead crews on CBS and Fox being able to watch it. So we, as Baltimore fans, we didn't have a team, but we were able to see the lead crew almost every week on both networks.
I don't remember if I don't think we ever did a game in Baltimore with John and Pat, but we did a
Well,
lot of
they would have left in '84, so so you wouldn't have.
Yeah, we did a
Yeah,
lot of Redskins games. And
yeah.
they were at RFK, and that was one of the
Well,
probably
that's
the
what.
best trip
Well,
was.
because John loved the NFL East.
Well, the NFL East was all NFC East was also good.
NFC East. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
NFC East was also good, and Sandy Grossman would capture the great shots of the Hog fans, and the seats, the bleachers
Yep.
bouncing up and down, and Jack Kent Cook, whether we like him or not, was a great visual right across in his box, wide open. And he'd be in there with the 60 Minutes people, Leslie Stahl or whatever, and yeah, and it was part of it was part of a real. You could remember that was back when RFK had a waiting list of like 70,000 people.
Oh, I remember this. Yeah, no, and we hated them as in Baltimore. So
Yes.
that's totally my tangent, my sidetrack. I apologize. Go back. What are you doing? What are you doing broadcast wise now with the football team?
So in 1985, I go out to do a preseason game with John in San Diego. The associate producer and I, Joan Vitrano, have to go to Television City in Los Angeles and do the pre-production, which at that time was to make 90 headshots for each team with, the technology of the day, which was awful, slow going to create a really schlocky product, but it took forever. Now we head down the 405 like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, always a fun ride to get to San Diego. Once in San Diego, it was right to programming the graphics. I don't remember spending much time with John at all, and it showed. And after the game, when I'm like, whew, I survived that, he came down out of the booth. I can still picture it now, hair flying, his flip card under his arm, cigar in his mouth, got right in my face. You and I need to spend more time together talking during the week. Nice to see you again, Coach. So 85 starts off, and it's a rocky, weird thing. I have inherited the support staff of the previous broadcast associate, which turns out was mostly his friends, my graphic operator, was not able to run the new graphic system that had been developed while I was in France by other people, and now he couldn't run that. You had still the dynamic, and this was a weird one. Bob Stenner would produce the first half of the season, and then the executive producer, Terry O'Neill, would come out to do the second half, and that threw everything into a tizzy because we could do a 4-hour show about Terry O'Neill. But the biggest thing that happened in '85 is that John was still taking trains, and Brent Musburger had gotten an assistant named Jimmy Tubbs. So somewhere it was decided that, well, Brent has an assistant, John should have an assistant. So John hired a kid who was his son Mike Madden's college roommate from Harvard. He came out to do the job, and it quickly turned out that the kid didn't like the job and wasn't very good at the job. And John, being a loyal man that he was, and because it's his son's college roommate, wasn't going to fire the kid because he just wouldn't. Meanwhile, all of the assistant work came floating down to me. And at one point, about halfway through the season, this kid, Mark, quit. John's reaction was, thank God, I didn't have to fire him. Assistants are a waste of time. I'll just have you do my stuff. And my answer was, again, I'm 24. Mm-hmm. I had a set of balls on me. I wish I still had them. That I said, John, you need an assistant because I can't do everything and be good at it. The only problem with the assistant was you hired the wrong person. I have 14 people a week that I hired that would do that job. Boom. Next day, 9 a.m., Gene Sage from IMG calls me. John says, you've got people. Do you have people? So yeah, I got people. So send them over. So I went and looked at my pad of my usual rotation. Now, at this time, most of our games were either New York, Philly, or Washington, maybe Chicago. And I go through the list of people, and the truth is I only really had one legitimate candidate named Sandy Montag. I didn't really know Sandy much. He had worked for me in 1984 on the kickoff classic between Nebraska and Penn State. The one time I got to work with Kurt Gowdy. Sandy showed up as a runner. I think he was dressed in his pajamas. I swear, I think he was wearing feety pajamas. And now I call him up and say on a Monday, hey, would you want to do this job? And I'm 25, he's 22. Yeah, I'd love to. All right, well, go see Gene Sage. I forgot about it as soon as I hung up the phone. I got other things to do. Thursday comes, and this kid who I've only seen in his underwear, his pajamas, and sweats comes in a 3-piece suit. I'm like, and of course, very cleverly, who died? No, I had that interview today. Oh, great, how'd it go? He goes, I'm coming to Washington this weekend. Great, I'll see you there. Now, just to back up for a second, during the first part of the '85 season, Sandy would work for me as a runner and a stat guy. He also paid his own way. Kids out there listening, because Sandy right now is very successful. He used to say, hey, I'll take People's Express, which was, JetBlue back then, or Southwest. I'll take People's Express to Chicago and New Orleans or Miami and work. Can I stay in your hotel room? And would you throw me a few extra bucks because I could control the payroll? So yeah, I'll do both those things. You come down, sleep on my floor. When John calls up at midnight for French fries or a stat, you're going to do it. And he did. So I send Sandy in for this interview. He says he's coming to Washington. We go down to Washington, D.C., by myself, have a meeting with Bob Stenner, the producer. John Madden has just driven down in a van with Sandy. And Sandy was carrying the 16 millimeter projector. They were very heavy. Mm-hmm. So we're up in the room. It's just me, Bob, and John. And Bob says to John, what do you want to do? John goes, let's watch some film. So I call Sandy in his room and say, Coach wants to watch film, bring the projector up. And Sandy says to me, does Coach need me to run the projector? I repeat this question to John. It was not a good question. The answer was something along the lines of, I've been coaching for 22 years. I've been watching film for 22 years. You two idiots think I can't run a projector? Who is this kid? Where'd you find him? What's wrong with you two? Sandy, bring the projector, leave it at the front door, run as fast as you can. So we get the projector, we watch the film. I think there was some discussion of what was on the film. I think there was more of a discussion about why Sandy Montag and I didn't think he was capable of running a projector. And that was the first year, and it was bumpy. Now, football-wise, remember, that's the Bears.
Oh,
And that's a really exciting team to be around. We did a lot of games in Chicago. We met all the characters. I remember doing a game in Cincinnati where we stayed in the same hotel as the Bears, the Westin, and the lobby is on the second floor. And Jim McMahon came running up the escalator, barefoot, being chased by fans like it was out of a Hard Day's Night. That crazy. Spent a little time around Ditka. He was very scary to be around. McMahon was a blast. Sweetness was sweetness. It was a great year of football, and the stats that we had about, how great their defense was, and that's the Fensick, Richard Dent, Mike Singletary, all that, great pictures for Sandy, the director. Soldier Field hadn't been turned into a spaceship yet. It was great pictures. And the only downside was that the Super Bowl went to NBC. That was the Steve Grogan Patriots. Walter doesn't get his touchdown. That was NBC.
well,
So
the,
it
fr-
kind of
the fridge was obviously on somebody's fantasy team. That's always been my theory. Somebody had the fridge for a touchdown in a fantasy league or a bet.
the only thing I'd say about Daniel Black is that I don't know if people were doing fantasy leagues as far back as 1985. That sounds early
You
to me.
know, I am one of the first people that got onto it. You're right. It was a couple years later because the guys who actually started. Here's another tangent. The guys who started what used to be called rotisserie baseball before they did
Yes,
fantasy.
yes,
They
yes.
started it. They met at a chicken rotisserie restaurant,
Oh, that's fun.
and that's where rotisserie baseball came from,
Right.
and that started before football. Now, what people quickly realized is football was a great sport to translate into
Of course.
fantasy, and that took off. But that's why baseball
Yeah.
started with rotisserie baseball because they met at the chicken rotisserie restaurant. There's your education from me today, ladies and
And
gentlemen.
I'm going to,
Ignore the Emmy Award winner. I've got the real
no,
information.
you're right, because I'm going to tell you where I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Because in 1982, when I worked in the NFL Today, Brent used to ask us on the back row there about certain stats like how does Nat Moore of the Dolphins do historically against the Buffalo Bills? And we'd give him the stat thinking it was for air, and it was for him filling out his fantasy league. So, yes, as early as 82, there were. So I'm wrong. I'll tell you this, though 85, it
It wasn't big until the
wasn't
late 80s.
widespread. It certainly
Yeah.
wasn't our crew, but it probably
I
existed.
remember it was USA Today for baseball did all the American League stats for the whole league on like a Tuesday on the back page of the USA Today, and on Wednesday you had to get the National League stats. And when I would commissioner the baseball league, I would have to get the USA Today every Tuesday and every Wednesday to do all the stats by hand. And this was late '80s. So anyway, all right, let's get to the fun stuff. Show off an Emmy. I've never seen an Emmy up close.
All right, hang on. I'll get you the good one.
I don't have any. They're all good to me.
So, heavier than you think. I
Wow.
don't know if you can see
There it is. I can't read it. What
what
does it
it's
say?
for. Um, this was for a tease I did, NCAA basketball in 1993. So at this point, I've moved up from, oh, piss boy, to I'm an associate producer. And that's really where I got to be creative. The rules back then were much more relaxed on commercial music and those kinds of things. That Emmy was for a tease I did for the NCAA basketball in 93. It was kind of a riff on the Michael Jordan, Larry Bird horse game. In this case, I got two kids from high school to mimic the great shots that had happened in the NCAA tournament so far. We went up to Riverside Park, no permit, no insurance, no nothing. One of the players' dads came to watch us to make sure we were legitimate. I don't know if he knew. I don't know if he thought we were legitimate. We set up a monitor on the court and just mimicked the shots and shot the same angle. And I'm telling you, these kids didn't. And these were two high school kids that they didn't miss a shot. I think we had to do one take twice. One shot, we had to do two takes. Every dunk, every reverse dunk, every shot, they were dynamite. They were perfect. They did a couple of scripted lines. I had all these chunks. But when I left the schoolyard, I had no idea if I had a piece. I didn't know. I had no idea if it was going to work. I cut it to me and Julio down by the schoolyard. I tried to get Paul Simon to participate. His agent was not very nice. So we did the music, but without Paul Simon. It included, at the very end, after matching shot for shot for shot for shot for shot, Duncan Bailey, this one here, it came down to, all right, Final Four is in New Orleans. That would be the Chris Webber Final Four. I need two people on the roof.
Chris
Yeah.
Webber.
I thought you were calling time out on me.
I was doing my Chris Webber impression.
Two players on the roof taking a shot down Bourbon Street. So we actually got two people in New Orleans.
Very cool.
Matching clothes. This one's wearing red with white. This one's wearing blue with black. You got to get up on the roof, send left to right, long lens, and they actually climbed up to the top of the Superdome and did this. Again, no permit.
The top
no,
of the Superdome?
They went. There was a hat. There's a hatch, like in a submarine.
Holy! I thought you meant at the top of a building, not the. Oh wow.
Oh no.
Okay, if you've never been to the top of the Superdome in New Orleans, people, it is a large building.
It's a large building.
It's a large building.
I don't like heights. I wouldn't have gone up and done it.
Oh, I wouldn't. Yeah.
So we had a match shot, which was the two kids in Riverside Park. They stood on an apple crate. We shot up against the sky and then matched it in to the two guys on the Superdome who weren't them. And people liked it. And it's a long turnaround because this was in, April of 93, and I get the award in May of 94. So it's so much later.
Very cool. So you did March Madness as well?
I did March Madness for about 12 years. Yeah. It was truly madness. In that time, I'd say the highlights would be what I just told you. Also, I did the Dr. Galakowicz, Coach Krzyzewski piece that people seem to respond to. And if you're around, you remember that, where it was the fake limo guy. And I did 2 or 3 One Shining Moments. And I got us sued for $1 million. But other than that,
I was going to say, how did One Shining Moment come to be?
So NBC, when they had their last year of the NCAA tournament, they were using the Kenny Loggins song, "This Is It." That was their theme. CBS got the tournament in '82. First year they had it was the Michael Jordan winning basket in New Orleans. And the first off-air music piece they did was done by someone named Patty Gorsuch. And Patty Gorsuch used, whatever commercial song she could find. The next year, CBS commissioned One Shining Moment, written by a guy named David Barrett out of Michigan, I believe. Eric Mann, who would later do the NFL Today as a producer for a very long time, he produced the first One Shining Moment. That was the first music piece cut to One Shining Moment. I want to say that was 1987. So between 82 and 87, it was being done to various other newly picked each year songs that nobody could remember. They write One Shining Moment. They use the original David Barrett version for Eric Mann. I got it in 88, which was the Danny Manning year. Mm-hmm. I then disappeared from CBS for 2 years and worked as John's assistant, which could be another story. When I came back in 91, the executive producer, Ted Shaker, had decided that One Shining Moment was overused and it was time for something else. I had done another One Shining Moment. I had gotten actually fan mail off of it, voicemails telling me how much he loved it. So I knew Jim Nance loved it. And I went to Nance and said, "Hey, Ted Shaker's trying to kill One Shining Moment." And so I guess Jim wrote him a letter, made a phone call. I went and showed them the 4 or 5 pieces of fan mail. Who gets fan mail? Right. Fan mail saying how much they loved One Shining Moment. And I pleaded with him that, look, we don't have any music that identifies us as being CBS Sports. Monday Night Football still has, dun, 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 dun. We don't have anything. Olympics, I won't try to sing it, but the Olympic, right. Everyone knows that Olympic theme. Mm-hmm. This is one song that seems to have a following. Why are you killing it? And so then it became, at some point, they changed it to Luther Vandross singing it and somebody else singing it. And now, of course, it's a mainstay. But at the time, they're looking to put it out of its misery. It's a lot of work going through a lot of reels of footage. It's a long process to get to, but it's a fun thing to do.
Well, but as a basketball fan, I mean, it is the thing we all look forward to every year. We all stay tuned in for that last segment. So I'm glad we have it.
Yeah. Oh no, it's great. In fact, the last Final Four I worked was 94. We were all leaving for Fox. It was in Charlotte. Last time they held a Final Four in an arena, not a stadium. Bill Clinton was there because it was Arkansas. That's when we did the Mike
Oh, that was
Krzyzewski.
the Nolan Richardson.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Nolan
Okay.
Richardson's the coach. Clinton's actually at the final. I got him. We
I
got him
remember that. Yeah.
to do an opening. That was a cool thing, getting him to do the opening for the Final Four. So we did the Krzyzewski, Yes I Am, which, do you want to hear that story? That's a fun story.
I don't like Krzyzewski. No.
Okay, we'll move on. So we did the Final Four. That's 94. And that's the last Final Four for most of us because we're all going to Fox. So David Barrett, the original singer of One Shining Moment, even though they were no longer using his voice, I invited him to Charlotte. He stayed with me. I did not make him an offer to be John Madden's assistant, but got him a pass. He came to watch the Final Four, and we got to talk about his song.
Well, Michael, this is going to be part one of a two-part special.
Oh, good.
Yes, because you cannot be contained to one session, and I cannot afford two sessions. So I've just made the executive decision. I'm having you back in a couple weeks.
I love the comeback. I'm not doing anything.
We're going to remember the transition right here of when you took time out with John and when everything switched over to Fox. We'll pick back up there. I love you. You're a treasure. Your stories are fantastic, and it's my podcast, so I can just put you on as much as I want and listen to your stories. So I'm going to do that.
I love talking with you. You bring out things I have long forgotten. It's nice to talk about them.
Well, I say this one every episode. I say it to every guest. If I'm lucky enough to be friends with them like we are, you know this off air too. I'm a passionate sports dork. I do not hide that. I absolutely love getting to do this. And you hearing these stories as much as we've talked, there's always something new every time we talk that I learned from you. So I want to thank you, and I'm going to call part one a go for today, and we're going to pick up. You and I will talk, but I want to have you within the next week or two because you and I have some exciting stuff going on, and I think we're going to share that with people in a couple weeks.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to leave this setting, these book stacks, so next time I know what we're looking at. So I don't have to waste your time.
No, absolutely. Michael Frank, thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks to your producers and everybody out there.
We got Leon and my daughter Addison. Everybody's here. So everybody, thank you. We appreciate you. And guys, thanks for listening or watching to another edition of Sports Ball and Baltimore Sports Collectibles.
Thanks, Danny. Good to spend time with you.
Pleasure, my friend.